Hi, everyone, and welcome to our final webinar this spring with Peggy Hoffman, who is the president of Mariner Management. You all know her by now. She's done many wonderful things for us. So today we are going to be talking about the leadership pipeline and succession planning. So I'm just going to pass it over to Peggy to take it away.
Great, thank you. I'm delighted to be back here again with you, and this time talking about a topic that is oh so important, not only to me and to you, but really to where we all are headed in the future in terms of keeping our components really vibrant and really digging deep into the member engagement. So I don't know how many of you get the reference on the photo, duck, duck. But I know as a kid, I used to play quite a bit duck, duck, goose. And you would sit there and you duck, 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 wondering, hoping, but not hoping that you'll be picked. Well, guess what? That's what too much of the succession planning is happening at the local and state level. And so we need to shift that because it really shouldn't be a surprise. And it shouldn't be, wherever you are in the process, you just get tired, so you pick somebody. So as Kelsey said, I'm Peggy Hoffman, and I always like to let people know that you can reach out to me if something, if you want to go further into something, if you've got a question about this. But the most important thing I want you to realize is that I sit in the seat that many of you are in, where we've got a board and we need to figure out who's the new person in. And so I'm going to bring some of the things that we've learned into this conversation today from that real experience, as well as tapping into research and lots of information on this topic around. So I'd like us to start by setting the expectation here about what leadership succession is or isn't. And I like to say to folks, leadership succession is truly, truly a verb. It's not a noun. It's not that plan. It's not that document that's sitting on the shelf. It's not something in your policy manual. It's actually something that we are very intentional and we live and breathe each and every day as local and state leaders. You see, if we relegate it to a plan, or if we think about it only that one time a year when we're putting together our candidates for the next board, wow, it's just not going to be successful. So, in fact, leadership succession is really baked in to our member engagement. That's right. The basis of our leadership succession has to be the member engagement strategy, that holistic approach that we have for our organization that connects members to your component. We don't want to think simply about members as customers. We want to think about members as citizens, as involved, engaged people in our organizations. And so if we begin to think of leadership succession way back at the early stages, we're able to actually build a really powerful pipeline. So a key part of the member engagement strategy is, in fact, your new member onboarding. That's the plan and the process and the actions that you take to plug somebody deeply into your local organization. I like to refer to it as the launch pad for your volunteering. And it is when you take the member engagement strategy, hone in on the new member onboarding program, that you begin to develop that deep member engagement in volunteering for your particular organization. Now, when we talk about volunteer engagement and we talk about the biggest picture of leadership succession, it's got lots and lots of elements in it. Everything from the succession map of how do I move from one position to the other, to all the roles and responsibilities, to a orientation for volunteers, a clear onboarding for volunteer leaders, and then a robust set of resources. And those resources are, of course, your policies and procedures, your how-tos, your technology that you give and available to them, your tools, the portal that you use to be collective in your communications and your documents. Could be Dropbox, could be Google Drive, could be an online community. and of course your communications all around and how you get the work done with your volunteer workforce. So just as sort of a little bit of a side note here, we do on the volunteer portal, there will be more detail on all of these. In fact, we've got some really good tips and tools coming on how do you build your engagement strategy and that new member onboarding piece. I want us to take a look at a couple of pieces of the volunteer engagement portion of this now. Now, there is, as I'm mentioning, some overlap to the new member onboarding program. So if we're going to start with this, if we're going to really truly understand the core of leadership succession, we have to understand that it begins with filling the pipeline. So when I say the pipeline, I'm not talking about the folks on a committee or the chairs on the committees, thinking of them as a pipeline to the board. I'm going even further down the pipeline, and I'm talking about getting members interested, excited about, and connecting them with the notion that a member is also a citizen. A member is also helping to do the work of this organization. So I want you to fill the pipeline as full as you can. For the more people in the pipeline, the greater chance you have of getting the right people sitting around the board table, sitting around the committee table. So filling the pipeline is going to take a couple of actions on our part. And I'd like for us to take a look at 4 of those actions, which are going to make a tremendous difference and allow us to get more people at the table and pull those people through the volunteering. So it starts with creating your map. I want us to give the broadest, brightest picture of opportunities. I want folks to really see the pathway to the leadership in our organization. Not that everyone's going to go all the way down that pathway. And not everyone is actually the best for that, right? But I want them to understand that we have this incredible ecosystem of all different kinds of roles and opportunities so that they begin to see how much they can do for the organization in some small, medium, and large ways. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. The second thing is I want you to hire the search party. Now, many of us have sort of a nominating committee or something that sounds a little bit like that. Some of you might have a membership committee or someone engaged with, beginning to look at getting people involved. But I want you to go even deeper in this definition. And I want you to think about, how do I have an active group of individuals looking at, engaging in conversation with our members and bringing them into the volunteer pipeline? Third is create the FOMO around leadership. Create the FOMO around engagement as a volunteer. And finally, it's really about mentoring the emerging volunteers. Now, go back to that game for just a moment, Duck, Duck, Goose. Okay, one of the problems that many of us get into is that we literally walk into a room and we start looking for someone at the moment we have an empty seat, right? So what we wind up doing is running in and going, you, come on over here and help us with this. It would be far more effective for us if we were talking to people and giving them little bits of information and ideas along the way, seeing somebody that kind of looks interesting and tapping them to learn more before you tap them to do more. So let's go a little deeper into these 4 elements so that you can walk away with some clear action steps. Now, let's start with creating that map or that volunteer picture. Oftentimes, when I say succession planning or succession plan or volunteer, what people think about immediately is the board, the leadership core. And that's understandable because at the end of the day, that board has a key governing responsibility, whether we're talking about at the local level or the state level. That is, of course, your leadership core. That's the group that is responsible for making sure the organization is meeting the members' needs, is being innovative in how they approach those things, and is coordinating the value proposition from the local all the way up to the national level. But it is far from all of the picture, right? So it's natural for us to think about the committees and teams in the context of volunteer leadership. Let me ask you though, do you think about the one-time opportunities? They're all volunteers. The one-time opportunity is that place where you have somebody comes in, rolls up their sleeve and does something that needs to get done at that moment. So what you're seeing here is actually, I picked this up from a set of, from an earlier presentation that we did here. This is a group of volunteers stuffing bags at a conference. So these folks just came in, did this, and then they went on their merry way. That's an important part of helping people see all the different opportunities. And what about these ongoing, I'm going to call them kind of short-term opportunities, where it's something that I don't have to commit to a year or 2 years or 3 years. It's not a big responsibility. It's a little more than coming in and stuffing a bag with some goodies. And it's actually potentially, it could be a one-time-ish, but it's probably takes a little bit of pre and a little bit of post activity. So what you see here is one of the things that we do with the chapter is we bring in our members as speakers, unpaid positions, an opportunity to be a subject matter expert. And so that is considered a short term because they come in and get them done. But the way we use our speakers is we ask everybody who's going to be a presenter to work with us ahead of time to help us promote the show, to help us create some content that can be a tease to get people to the show, and afterwards to help us to create some to create the follow-up content. So it's a short term. Takes a couple of connection points in order to make that happen. But you can be a speaker. Same thing with our judging for our awards program. Same thing for our bloggers. Same thing for our social media rep. All of these are short-term, ongoing kinds of opportunities. So the ongoing really references two things here, guys and gals, in the way I'm speaking to this. Ongoing meaning it's not we all start in January and we pick everybody in January and it runs through the end of the year. Ongoing means these are pop-ups. These happen here and there and everywhere. And ongoing also means it's a little bit more of a lift, again, than that one little micro job. What I want you to do is to step back and to say to yourself, as you're trying to fill the pipeline, right? As you're trying to understand who can be next, who can come into leadership, I want you to step back and say, what are all the different ways that we can involve our members in the organization to help get the work done that gives them a little taste and allows them to see how that they can ante up, if you will, and take a bigger opportunity, how they can plug themselves into lots of different opportunities to see which one really kind of jazzes them. I want you to create a picture that offers small, medium, and large opportunities. One that allows me to bring my skills directly and use them versus one that allows me to learn a little bit more. So if I'm a subject matter expert on something and I have a presentation presence, I can come in and be that speaker. But maybe I want to learn how to do an event. So I join a small team that's putting together an event. Or maybe I join the conference committee and get involved sort of in a smaller way, but on a larger group that's working towards a more significant goal. When you create many opportunities here, right? When you find lots of different ways to bring people, two things that are really important happen. First of all, is you let people take a taste. You know how when you're in the mall and there's this great, when we get back to the mall, right? There's this great cheese and wine store at our mall. And one of the things I love doing is every time you're in the mall, you go and they have a wonderful display out front, and they're always doing cheese tasting or dip tasting or whatever. And I get a little taste. So what I want you to do when you do this kind of a really cool picture is you give people lots of opportunities to take a taste. And when they like it, they come on in, learn a little bit more, get a little bit more involved, right? So that's one aspect that helps with being able to paint this picture. The second thing is the more jobs, the more people you can bring into the pipeline. We know from research that about 60% of the folks that were going to lift a hand to help in a local or state level, about 60% do not want a long-term commitment. They don't want a title that requires 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. So what happens is, if the only things we have are that we have a smaller pool of people to pull in to our board, by creating a lot more opportunities, you have more folks that you can bring into that. So if we want to build the pool, so we have a better selection for who's next, painting this picture and creating it as robust as you can will make a difference. Let me show you how one chapter that I'm involved with took a look at this and created a picture that was a little bit more accessible. So this is a flyer. There's also connection on our website. This is a flyer for the Maryland chapter of PRSA Maryland. One of the things we did was we sat down and we looked at the big positions, and then we broke down and we looked at where are there some other smaller things around those. And we created this map. And we even said at the beginning, small ways and more. And we put some one-time opportunities there. We put some team opportunities. Now notice not the word committee. We do have committees, but we talked about if you want to be come on up and get something done and go, do you want to be on a team so you can be with other people as part of your motivation for volunteering to meet other people, to make connections? Then a team opportunity would be good. We did say leadership opportunities, but even the leadership opportunities, notice how we gave it a variety. Serve on the board, yes, but we have a conference chair and a Best in Maryland chair. What's really cool about those positions is they really operate the 9 to 12 months period. That makes them much more approachable. Or you could be an education liaison to one of our student chapters. That's one academic year. So even in the leadership opportunities, we gave them a variety, right? And of course, ongoing opportunities are those things where they come and they go, they're easy, you can do them many different times if it's something that fits you, right? So what I'm suggesting here, in order for you to fill the pipeline, is make sure that you have lots of different opportunities for folks to get involved in. All right. Let's hire the search party, because you got all these folks coming in. Two things are going to happen. One is you're going to have some posted positions and nobody, so you need to fill those positions, right? And quite frankly, the second thing is that if the goal here is to help people not only see that there's a party to come into, but to help them navigate that and to help them find the role that will give them the greatest satisfaction so they will climb the ladder a little further, we need to have that search party. So I love this. The picture that you're seeing right here is actually the Fort Collins Chamber of Commerce. And I was in a Chamber of Commerce, and I've been involved and around Chamber of Commerce, and it's pretty standard for them to have a red carpet committee. And so here's a concept that we can use in our own organization. You could call it the red carpet committee. One other organization I ran into recently calls it the key committee. Someone else calls it the ambassadors. What it is a member engagement committee or team. And their whole idea is to be welcoming and warm. You see, this is connected very clearly to the new member onboarding program, but it goes a little bit further. It teases out so you can fill that pipeline. This is the group that not only welcomes, but interviews people. I call it a getting to know you conversation. It's a conversation around how are you doing? Good. What are you doing? Oh, cool. What do you want to be doing? Awesome. Great. Well, listen, let me tell you a little bit about, let me match some of what you're saying in these three things to some things the organization is doing. You're helping them map their way to volunteering. So the first conversation you have with someone is not, oh my gosh, we got some openings on the board. The first conversation you have is, what are you interested in? Have you thought about getting more involved in the organization? Well, sure, we got some really small ways. How about, have you thought about being a greeter at one of our events? Have you thought about maybe coming in on one of our Zoom conversations? Because we know a lot of you are doing a lot of virtual work right now. Come in on our Zoom conversation and help us moderate the chat. So the red carpet committee is the one that makes your members feel incredibly special and helps them navigate through the organization. So you could take your membership committee and repurpose it. You could create another committee in and of itself, just calling it the red carpet committee and have it plug in. A great source for this is to go to your seasoned volunteers who are no longer on the board, or maybe you have some seasoned volunteers who are looking for how to be a really meaningful role and they need to move off of the board and you need to give them a really meaningful, important role. Maybe it's the red carpet committee. So think about that. How can you create an opportunity to put together a search party that helps members get to know the organization and map their way to volunteering? Now, I think that one of the most powerful things we can do is create the FOMO. So that means truly selling the fun as well as the work of volunteering. So the picture you're seeing here is my board back in January. We had a very fun kickoff meeting. We've had a lot of really cool board meetings over time. We did have one in connection with a wine visit, which was kind of neat, a wine tour. We did one at the Babe Ruth Museum. So we had a tour of the museum. We're always trying to show all of our members that being a volunteer leader is work, but it's a special kind of fun as well. I think that this is a part that we underestimate in how important this is. You see, people, when they say yes to volunteering, everything we know about that is that there's a part of it of what's in it for me and what's in it for the organization. And tied up in all of that is the experience. And for the most part, people will even do hard work if it's with people accomplishing something that's moving the mission forward and has that opportunity of experience. There's a combination of fun and it's intriguing and creates curiosity. And so oftentimes what we do, and think about this is you, I've seen this in way too many chapter meetings. You stand up and you say, hi, I'm president and it's been so exciting. It's a lot of work. Oh yes, in fact, I've got some folks over here that really help. We have worked really hard to bring you this event. And in fact, I mean, the hard work doesn't stop after this, but that's the beauty of being a volunteer because we get a chance to work really hard. I mean, I have heard volunteers actually get up and use the phrase work hard so many times that you begin to see people just kind of go like, thank goodness I'm not on that group. So I want us to think about how are you projecting the role of being a volunteer leader in your group? How can you build the fun in? So could it be that you have some fun at some events and you take some pictures and you show the board having fun as well as working? Could it be that, we've worn these hats to a couple of our events afterwards? Wear the hat. Where'd you get the hat? Oh my gosh. This is one of the many things that we do at our board meetings. Can you take pictures of the board working and smiling, right? Can you use testimonials about the board work in which people are caught, let's say in the middle of a planning meeting, you put a video up, because we all have videos on our phone, and you say, hey, are we having fun yet? Yeah, we're having fun. Guys, sell the fun as well as the work of volunteering. People want to be in on the party. Show them the party. Yeah, it's got some hard work, but show them the party. Okay. We've covered a number of different things here. I want to talk about mentoring emerging leaders. And the reason I'm going to talk about this is part of what makes succession work is that you have people in the wings. And those people in the wings are nearly ready, right? But lots of times they're people that are interested and they're kind of curious and they want to know more before they can commit. When we don't create this wonderful safe space, it's really hard to get people to say yes. I mean, how many times have you asked somebody that you know would be a really good leader? I mean, like, you're on the board, you've been on the board, you know the dynamics of the board, and you think, gosh, Susan would be excellent. But Susan hasn't really been around. She doesn't really know what she's saying yes to. And so oftentimes the conversation will be, so Susan, we have an opening on the board. We'd like you to come onto the board. And there's hesitancy. Well, I don't know. I mean, I am really busy and I got my job and my kid and, I'm going back to grad school and I don't know if it's going to fit in. What you're really hearing there is a lot of I don't knows. Not about all those conflicting things, but I don't really know what you're asking me. I don't really know if it's going to be fun, if it's going to be work, how much time it's going to take. I really don't know what the commitment is. I don't know. I don't know if I want to do that, right? So mentoring emerging leaders is helping them explore those questions before you ever ask the question. So they're asking you the question of when can I come on board? So a couple of suggestions here. If you see somebody that looks like a potential, I want you to introduce them to the other leaders before you even ask or think. And you don't have to say, hey, listen, we think you'd be on the board, so we want to sort of introduce you around. No. This is getting them, without being asked the question, getting them to know a little more about you and the leadership. It's about getting them curious enough that they ask the question of you. So let's say that I'm going to take it for a moment. So many of us had face-to-face events. We'll get back to those. Let's say you're at a face-to-face event and Susan is there and you say, well, Susan, do you know? And you introduce them to, maybe it's your treasurer, maybe it's your someone who's been on the board for 2 years, maybe it's the person who just came on the board last year, right? And then say, oh, and by the way, do you know the program chair here? In other words, you are getting anybody that you think has some potential, that you'd really like to explore the leadership. You're getting them in the group, right? You're introducing them around. You're inviting them to meet the other leaders. You see, one of the most powerful things I've seen work in associations is when you see somebody that you want to meet, right? But you're not sure if you're at their level. You're not sure, you're like, I don't know them well enough to have an introduction. And then they get to know them and then they feel like they belong. So we need to help our leaders, our emerging leaders, feel like they belong ahead of time. So the other powerful thing is to give them a virtual tour of how the component works. So that's to say, what does the board do? What do the committees do? What do the small groups do? And to sort of share with them the resources and the decisions, and the decisions made. So the idea here is to sort of let them see how the group, the organization works to get its work done. Now, the reason why I use the virtual tour is sometimes the people think the first thing they think is, oh, you know what we're going to do? Let's invite them to a board meeting. No, I want you to do it in a way that's kind of, I want to call it a safer environment. So what do I mean by that? I mean, in casual conversations, mentioning how the board makes decisions. Like, you know, the board is really excited. We did this. We just made this decision about turning this workshop, which we can't do right now, into a virtual event. And we've made a decision to take this workshop that would have been 2 hours. We're going to have an hour on Tuesday, an hour on Wednesday. And as you're talking about this, you add to the conversation how you made that decision. Like, you know, we have Zoom available. By the way, you know, that's a really cool thing about being a volunteer here is we have access to this Zoom account that allows us to have our meetings virtually and allows us to share ideas. I'm talking about you thinking proactively about how do we work as a leadership and how can I share that with emerging leaders. And then take it to one more almost concrete way of that. At some point, if you've got somebody who is, let's say they're on a committee and let's even say they're the chair, inviting them to see how the board works, right? Inviting them to come to a board meeting allows them to see the group in action and see the dynamics. Now, notice how this is the third item on my list as opposed to the first or second. There's a couple of reasons behind that, and there's a little bit of a caution around this one. If you have boring board meetings, if you have boring board meetings, I know we can say that, and you invite somebody, they're going to be turned off. So if you have a dynamic meeting, so let me give you an example of that. Generally speaking, for PRSA Maryland, for the first meeting of the year, it's our strat planning, it's our exciting meeting. It's also, generally speaking, the most fun meeting. That's the meeting we will invite people to. And we do it in the context of, it's a strat planning meeting, so we want to get input from folks that are different than sitting around the table. So we are giving them a role at that meeting, right? It's not a decision making, it's not a voting, but it's an input role. We're showing them how we like to have conversation. And the conversation tends to be a little bit more bubbly and forward thinking and innovative at that point. So I'm bringing them to a meeting that's going to show us at our best. And so that's the caveat for this. Don't have them just come to any meeting. Be strategic and have them come to a meeting where they can have a role. And they're not just sitting on the side, but they're sitting at the table as a peer, as one of your key stakeholders, AKA member, right? And having an opportunity to see the board in action. So mentoring the emerging leaders is helping them see that they're part of the group. It's helping them have an inside look at how that group works. And it's an opportunity to be in the room at one time. Just by doing these three things, you're going to actually take some folks that are questioning, because they have so many of those unanswered questionings. Questioning, is this even interesting? You're really piquing their curiosity and you're showing them how that they fit. Then when it's time for you to put together the slate, they may ask, or minimally, you may have to ask them, but they're much more receptive. So this cannot be underestimated, the power of what I have seen this happen. It is just, I've seen this work miracles in terms of bringing some new folks. And matter of fact, if I went back to that, the picture, let me just go back one moment. Do you see the gentleman holding the King of Hearts? So here's a success story. He is actually an educator in public relations. He's practiced public relations for years. One of the things was he was interested in getting his APR, which is a designation. So the woman in the center with the wonderful camel colored coat on was our APR chair. She's on the board. When he wanted to have an APR, she connected him. She brought him into a board meeting after he'd been around to talk about the value of APR and how the organization could really work better with that. He saw that. Plus, we then got him involved in part of the session planning that related to his students at the conference. So when it came time for my president to say, David, he was like, yes. That's the power of mentoring emerging leaders by inviting them to meet leaders, by showing them a little bit how we do this, and then asking them to come and sit at the table to see how it feels. So mentoring emerging leaders is so ever so critical. So I want to talk about one last final point. I'm going to call it the get out of the way point. You see, all of this, you could do all of this and succession planning might still fall flat. And it's sometimes, I hate to say this, but it's us. We're in the way. So let me leave you with a couple of thoughts about how to get out of your way so that you can make the things that we've talked about in this webinar work for you. So first, stop long, boring meetings. As a member of your board or on a committee, it is really critical that we rethink how we use our time in meetings. We rethink how we use our time in working and getting the work of the organization done. You can stop the boring meetings lots of ways. First of all, you can just put we're gonna have a meeting. We're doing it in 45 minutes. Just put some time constraints around it. You'll tend to move things along. You'll tend to keep some energy in the room. Add an icebreaker at the beginning. Include dinner or drinks or coffee, right? So you have that kind of a sitting around the table and breaking bread kind of concept, right? Take time to ask one person each time to, share something new or a new story or a new tip. Use a TED Talk, one of the 3 to 5 minute TED Talks on a really cool idea to inspire folks. Play a little game, a little Jeopardy game or Go Fish game even. One of the things we did when we had the cards, we were using the cards to as part of a whole icebreaker. But it was really interesting to see people gather the cards and spin to shuffle them and pass them out, just having some fun. So maybe it's just having some props, right? Stop the long, boring meetings. So in an essence, reset the agenda, pare down the agenda, add fun. Okay, 2, honor term limits. I know that all of us are at some place where we don't have somebody in succession, and so we just want to go ahead and say to somebody, well, come on, do another year. Or, well, and you kind of guilt them into it. Let me explain something to you. When someone says yes, and the job is 12 months, at the end, they're guilted into another 12 months, that's fine. But I always guarantee you, I've seen this over and over again, the guilt year produces less than the first year. So you're really not in that much better of a space. Honor term limits for another reason is that it allows you to bring in fresh faces and thinking, okay? So I'm just gonna highlight this. Don't play the guilt trip. One of the interesting things that I have found with another group that I've worked with is we ran into a situation where we did not have a board position. And so we were starting to play the guilt trip. And I said, well, let's not fill it. And they went, what? I said, well, let's let it go empty. And if the job that that person needed to be done, that position needed to be done, didn't get done, we'd see how important that is. I know this is a risk, okay? I understand this. I said, but if it's important, somebody will step up. But if we have a placeholder in that, we'll never fill the position. So I want you to know it took a couple of months and somebody stepped up. Will it happen that way all the time? No, I can't promise you that. But I can tell you this, that as you get in the habit of honoring term limits, you will have more people able to say yes, because the message on the street is, if you ask me for 12 months, I'm going to give you 12 months, and it's going to be a good experience for all of us. And then I want to have a candid conversation, brief albeit, about long-term board members. One of the things that we have really begun to understand in a lot of the volunteer research is that the message of having the same people around the table year after year does two things. The first thing is the message out to the members are, don't worry, they've got it. They've been around. Don't worry, they've got it. Okay. So it has this message that you're not expecting out there. And then the longer someone sits there, the more likely for someone else to want to unseat that person diminishes, right? The second thing that it does is that what we've seen is over time is that board members become less willing to take risks and be innovative. It's much easier as they get more tired. It's much, much easier for them to do cut and paste. So it's really important, not that we dispose of volunteers, but that we find new ways to use the volunteers. So let's go back to that red carpet committee. You could take some longer term board members and say, listen, we want to start this initiative over here. You know the inner workings of the organization. Let's shift you over. So what can you do here? Well, first of all, see above. If you honor term limits and don't play that initial guilt trip, people will move over. And secondly, letting go. And what do I mean by letting go? I mean, there's two things involved in that conversation. But largely, it's giving people permission to leave. It's giving permission, even though there's not a seat to be filled. So I'll be honest with you. A couple of years ago on my PRSA board, we had somebody who just stayed and stayed and stayed. And it was really because there was nobody to come into that position and felt like they couldn't let the organization down. But the work quality was was diminishing. So finally we said, hey, we need to find somebody else in here. We're going to let the position open. We want the membership to know that this is a position that we need. And we think that'll work. It took a little bit, but we did. But by letting that person go, we freed them up. They became a raving fan. They helped us with another program. We did not lose them, but we did open up a space for another person. So get out of your way. First and foremost, spice up those meetings. Secondly, honor those term limits so that you're honest when you ask someone to do the job. And third, just allow long-term board members to find other roles. So another thing about getting out of the way is how are we speaking? How are we speaking internally with the board? How are we reflecting that externally? So just real quickly, I want to make this point here because I think this is really critical. If you have used any one of these phrases, if you have responded to a newer volunteer with any of these phrases, I'd like you to sit back, take a deep breath, and figure out how you can change your language. You see, there's nothing more of a turnoff than when I'm a new volunteer and I come to the table and I have this idea and I go, well, we don't do it that way. Or the way we do it is, or maybe you say, yeah, well, we tried that a few years ago. So everything has changed, guys. People told me a while back that they didn't really need to think so much about virtual training because everybody wanted to get together. Well, guess what's happened in our current time? What's happened is that we've gotten much more used to virtual learning. Recent article in Forbes was all about how the adoption of virtual learning has outpaced all other kinds of learning in the last month and a half. So even if you tried something a few years ago, it may be worth trying it again. So I want you to change your language. I want you to think about, how can I shift my thinking to stop worrying about we did this or we didn't do this, or it won't work, or I think, or I got the blinders on, and say, well, let me just be open. So I always say to folks, and I've said this any number of times, there's a couple of board members I still say to it, is put a smile on your face, even if you feel like you have to say, we tried that a few years ago, put a smile on your face. We tried that a few years ago, but hey, let's look at it again. Or, well, the way we do it is, but what if, and even better than all of that, what if you could get rid of the word but? Well, the way we do it is X. And if we thought about this differently, we could move it in this direction. So let me give you an example right now of a issue that my board is looking at that needs a shift in the change. Shift in the way we're thinking about this, a change in our language. We always do an awards program, and the awards program is always a big December event. And it's a big event from a revenue perspective, from a number of people, from an outreach perspective. So it's a lot of big, we call it a gala, and we have a lot of fun with it. Okay. Well, it occurs in December. In this particular given year, we're looking at December and going, not sure we're going to have a big in-person gala, number one. Number two, budgets are tight all across the state. Folks are really focused on getting through this period of time. So we might actually not have as robust a nominations process. So distraction is going to be an issue. So then the question becomes, well, what are we going to do? So originally it was, we can't do it. We've never done a virtual one, so therefore we can't do it. That's not the way you do awards programs. Okay. And then the other person said, well, if we're not going to do an awards program, there's no reason to have an awards. So one voice in our board said, well, hang on a second. We're all scurrying like crazy. We're pivoting constantly to figure our way around this thing. It'd be great to celebrate that we got through that. Well, how could you celebrate that? Well, what if we had a few extra new awards that were just, I pivoted quickly and I got X. So we're in that whole process right now. So I can't tell you how it's going to come out, but I can tell you that if we stuck with this is the way we do it, and it can't be done that way, a couple of things would happen. First of all, the board would feel like, well, I can't do this. I can't process. I've let something down, right? So it has that whole feeling of it. Secondly, it wouldn't have allowed us to stretch ourselves and think differently, right? And three, it would have shut down conversation. So what I'm suggesting to you very simply is that we have this opportunity, particularly now, to get rid of this, we don't do it that way, or we tried it a couple of years or it won't work, and instead say yes and then be open to new ideas. So if you want to bring in new leaders, you have to be an organization, you have to be a board, you have to be leaders who are open. When I come in and raise my hand to be on your board or to be in your chair of our committee, I'm looking for opportunities to stretch myself and to have my voice be heard. Let's change our language. And the last thing about this is I want you, particularly those of you that are presidents or incoming presidents, and you're saying to yourself, I got to put together a really good board. I want you to understand the power of giving board members latitude and freedom. This is not your year. You are not the only voice at the table. And the degree to which you allow your board members to find their voice, to engage in some fresh ideas and thinking, the more likely they are to think that they want to ascend to leadership. So give board members appropriate latitude and freedom. Okay, guys, we've touched on a bunch of different things about how we can really do the who's up next and get really good results from that. So, we talked about how leadership succession is truly a verb. It's baking it into what we do as leaders. And we talked about tying it, not thinking about it from the board down, but thinking about it from member engagement strategy up. We talked about really using that new member onboarding. It could be also, by the way, for members at renewal time, but using that onboarding strategy to really help folks begin to map their way through it. We talked about creating this beautiful view that people can, that your members can use to sort of project where they'd like to be, right? We talked about having that incredible hiring team, the team that's going out there to really have really good personal conversations. We talked about baking some fun in and making sure you share it so that people see the vibrancy, the excitement of being on the board. And then we talked a little bit about how to change your language, move away from some of those negative words that are keeping people to kind of step away. Talk about all of those things. Now, I don't know where you are individually with your own component. So I want you to look at these things and I want you to say, where's the low-hanging fruit? What's one thing I can try right away? How can I put this to use in some small way and allow it to build? We can't solve succession planning overnight, but by making it a verb, we can constantly be moving forward. So, what will you try? It's a pleasure talking with you today. Good luck.